Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Nikki from Illuminated Movement Astrology, here to talk today about the upcoming new moon in Pisces, which happens to be a super moon. Now, we usually think about supermoons in terms of the full moon, right? Because we can see it, but supermoons also happen with new moons, and this one is no exception. So, what's the big deal about a supermoon? Well, it makes the emotional realm, the intensity of the moon, that much stronger. So, I don't know about you, but pretty much everyone that I talk to lately is really feeling a lot of this energy, almost like, in a sense, like a compression. Like there's so much happening, either with people personally or within the world or around them, that it's almost overwhelming at this point. So we'll talk a bit about that as well, because part of that is the Pisces signature. So many planets in Pisces right now, and then quite a few of them also in Aquarius. So we're dealing with the last two signs of the zodiac, and they have a lot to do with completion kinds of energy, taking us beyond where we've been before, really asking us to stretch ourselves and to get in a new placement for ourselves, globally, socially, personally, interrelationally, because of some of the big alignments that are coming up. Between 2020 and 2026, we have a series of really, really rare transits that typically take hundreds of years, if not thousands of years to complete. And so we're at a time where we're really, really going through the most massive changes that anyone has in recorded history, right? So far, who knows what we'll dig up? But it's a lot. There's a lot going on. So let's take a look at the new moon, talk about it, and give some pointers on how you can best navigate the waters of Pisces. All right, so I have this chart drawn up for California time because that's where I'm located. You're welcome to adjust the time to your time zone. And I have this chart pulled up at 0 Aries for a couple of reasons. One, I know out there in my audience, you all are all over the United States and in different parts of the world. So I wanted to give this just kind of an easier, blank slate, if you will. So it's easier to look at. Number one. Number two, I wanted to do this because I want to illustrate something that I think is significant about this new moon in particular. So let's identify the new moon first. So that's the sun and the moon together, right? At 20 degrees of Pisces. So we have the sun and the moon. Again, that's what makes a new moon. If the moon was on the opposite side of the sun, it would be a full moon. So here we are, 20 degrees Pisces. So you're going to want to look at your Pisces house. Where is the sign of Pisces in your particular chart? That's going to give you a lot of clues as to where this energy is happening in your personal life, according to the orientation of your personal chart. So take a look at that as well. Now, the thing that I find really significant here about the position of this new moon has to do with where the planets are behind the lunation. Okay, so here's the lunation is the sun and the moon. When we look behind it, we can see there's Saturn, Venus, Mars, and Pluto. All right, there's 4 planets behind this new moon. If we look in front of the new moon, right, we have Neptune, Mercury, these two, North Node and Chiron, they're not planets. But if we go down to the next planets, we would have Jupiter and Uranus. So 4 planets on either side of this new moon. Why is that significant? Well, when we look at new moons, we automatically tend to default to they're new, which is true, but it's a little bit misleading. So new moon, we have to take into account where the other planets are in the chart, and also the sign that this is happening in. Pisces is a sign of endings. It's the end of the zodiac, right? Aries, that 0 Aries, is the new point. It's the creation point. It's the God point of how we start new things. Everything comes from Pisces, right? Back into the one. So we've got the one of Aries, the individual expression of the divine coming through all of us, going all the way around the zodiac, all the way back through Pisces, where we return all 12 slices to the one again. And the cycle repeats itself. So that's significant. And when we look at there's four planets behind, four in the front, this speaks a lot to endings and beginnings, right? There's a lot that we are closing out personally and collectively, and there's so much that's beginning, right? We're on the precipice. In a sense, we're standing in the doorway with one foot in the old world and one foot in the new world. Or you could take it, if that's too lofty, you could take it down. Maybe it's 1 foot in, let's say, an old job and one in a new, but it hasn't quite reached that fullness of the new point. So that's where we are. And with all of this Pisces, all that water energy, all the water signs have to do with emotions. They have to do with intuition. They have to do with feelings. They have to do on some level with psychic, right? Phenomenon, psychic feelings, like the things that we pick up from other people, the non kind of verbal auras that we all have, the vibes that everything on this planet gives out. Pisces is incredibly sensitive here. It's a mutable sign. So again, mutability, we're talking about sharing things. We're talking about the end of a season, preparing for the new. So all the mutable signs share that in common. They have this ending type quality to them, and Pisces is no exception, particularly because it is the final, the 12th stage before we begin again in Aries. So with all that in mind, think about what is going on in your own life, or perhaps it's, your partner or members of your family or your friends or something, outside of yourself that's possible. Where is this energy showing up for you? And how can you best bring it in? What do you need, in a sense, to let go of? Pisces really asks us to let go of things so that you can start something new. What is it that, in a sense, you expected to happen that hasn't materialized? Maybe what grip do you need to loosen in order for yourself to move on? That's one possibility here. Another is about compassion. Pisces really has to do with compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, compassion for those with whom we do not agree, right? The 12th house also can sometimes have to do with secret enemies, people who are working against us, or things that are happening behind the scenes. Can we find compassion for those things in our lives? That's really challenging right now in certain ways, right? There's a lot that we need to open our hearts to, and Pisces is a beautiful sign about opening the heart. So really stepping into the realms of going beyond just the self. And if we look at the two rulers, let me clear this out, but if we look at the rulers of this new moon in Pisces, we have the ancient ruler, the traditional ruler, which is Jupiter, right, sitting in the sign of Taurus, coming up on the conjunction with Uranus, which will be happening a little over a month from, about a month, 6 weeks from now, in the sign of Taurus. And so when we look at that, we think about Taurus. What does Taurus do? Well, Taurus builds. Taurus looks at security, looks at value. And we can interpret that in many different ways, right? There's many different levels on which anything in astrology is occurring, whether that's psychological, it's literal, right? It's got a higher octave, it's got a lower octave. So in a sense, when we look at this, we look at Pisces, what do we need to share? What do we need to give away? What do we need to contribute to the greater whole to be of service? Because remember, Pisces and Virgo are the service axis, amongst other things, that comes from Taurus. What is Taurus? Taurus is our resources, our talents, our capacities. What do we have? What do we own? What do we possess within us that we can share out in the world for the greater good? It's a really big ask on this new moon. So have a think about that. Maybe bounce it off of other people who know you well. Like, what if you asked a really close friend or someone who you feel, you could ask this kind of question to, what do I have to share? What are my strengths? What are my gifts that you see that, maybe I don't see? Because sometimes it's hard when we just look at ourselves and often it's not maybe that we don't value ourselves, although that's possible. Sometimes it's that we do things so easily, right? Like our talents that we came in with, the things that we're so good at, we don't even recognize them as valuable to others. And so that may be something that we can take a look at with this new moon. And that could be the new incorporation that we bring forward. Because this new moon is not just about newness, right? It's about the things we already have, the things that are already in motion. Because remember, we have all these planets behind the lunation as well as in the front. But the ones that are in the front, they've been there for a while with the exception of Mercury moving at 0 degrees Aries just hours before this new moon, Neptune, Jupiter, and Uranus, they've been there for a while. They haven't just, dropped into the signs in front of the lunation. So this is about bringing forward the things from yourself that are of value that you can share in a greater way, or maybe, be of service in a better way. And part of that is our divine mission on this planet. I get asked, one of the number one questions I get asked all the time in readings is, what's my purpose? And that's such a big question in and of itself. But part of your purpose is being who you are with all of your quirks, with all of the things that maybe don't seem all that valuable that you share with other people and they turn out to be quite valuable. That is part of your life's purpose. So really Jupiter and Taurus bringing that to the forefront, conjunct Uranus over here. It's a little bit wide, but it's 7 degrees, so we'll take it. Really coming up on how can you do this in a new way? Remember, Uranus is your genius. It's where you can be very innovative. It's where you're outside the box. It's where you connect to the collective memory and are able to download, right? These like packets of information, packets of inspiration. Uranus and Pisces both have to do with that, as well as Neptune. So we've got all of this ability if we're able to get through some of the noise, get through some of the overwhelm, get through some of the pressure. If we can find a place where we can tap in, there's a lot of breakthrough energy that can happen here, particularly because Uranus is making a square to our friend Mars in Aquarius. Right? Venus had done this about a week before. Now it's Mars's turn. So Venus setting the stage. She was the ruler, right? Or is the ruler, excuse me, of Taurus. And now Mars is following suit. Mars, the ruler of this North Node Chiron. So again, asking us like, what do we have? What can we share? What are we passionate about? And if we've lost our passion, how can we ignite that back? And when we lose our passion, we've lost Mars. We've lost touch with Mars. And Mars is not just, a destructive warrior planet, although he can be, right? When he doesn't have something productive, proactive to do, something constructive, he will be destructive. And especially with this square to Uranus, I mean, that's a real possibility here. Now, that may be good, right? Uranus, we are reminded of the Tower card in the zodiac, or not the zodiac, excuse me, in the tarot, that the Tower card in so many ways people don't like to see, right? Because that means that something is suddenly changing or falling, or there's an upset happening. And not all of us like that, particularly the Taurus parts of us, right? That strive so hard for security. We don't want to see the things that we've built fall. But when you really look at that Tower card, part of the question is, well, what would have happened to the people if they'd stayed in the tower, right? When that lightning struck it and the fire was happening, if they'd stayed in the tower, nothing good would have happened to them, right? At least outside the tower, there's a possibility of a new start. So that's one way to look at that, that these things that break through or break down, if we can instead of getting stuck in the woe is me, why did this happen? Everything bad always happens to me, whatever the story is there. If we can start to eventually move beyond that, because, we don't want to bypass emotions. It's perfectly natural and normal to be upset when things change and we didn't want them to, right? Honor that. Don't try to just pretend like everything's fine, right? That doesn't work out. But once you can get past the emotional part of it, or the story part of it, can you look at what are the things that are breaking down that are actually blessings in your life, right? There's a reason we have that term blessings in disguise. And so on this new moon and carrying forward this energy of being able to break through with that Mars, that Uranus, in a big way. Maybe it's our beliefs, right? Do we have a limiting belief that needs to come down, that needs to, we need to punch through the wall of something that's keeping us, in a sense, imprisoned? Right? What is that? This new moon is a great time to bring that energy out and bring it forward so that we don't have to stay stuck, right? Sometimes Pisces can talk also about, or the 12th house can also talk about places where, how do I want to say this? The traditional way is to talk about it, places like institutions or where we get removed from society. And that has a positive and negative connotation, but in some ways, the ways in which we have self-undoing, the ways in which we trip ourselves up, can we move beyond them at this point? That is a beautiful, beautiful invitation, because the other ruler here, I'm gonna clear this out, the other ruler of this new moon in Pisces is Neptune, right? That's the modern ruler. And so if we look at Neptune sitting in his own sign, Neptune, the god of the sea, right? So part of this emotional overwhelm that we're all dealing with to more or less extent partially comes in through Neptune being strong in his own sign at the final degrees of, oops, I kind of drew over that, at the final degrees. So anytime a planet, and particularly an outer planet, reaches the final degrees of a sign, it's like the volume gets turned up. Okay, so the volume is like up to 11 right now with Neptune and Pisces. And the positive expression of this is, again, being able to connect to the greater whole, to spirit, to source, to the field, whatever that is for you, to be able to connect to things that are outside of yourself that have to do. Neptune also has to do with the arts and with music and things like that. Even if you're not an artist, sometimes, not sometimes, but often in the West, we've taken on this idea that art has to be done for money, or you have to be a starving artist, right? There's something in there that has gotten distorted, when really art and artistic things, musical things, dancing, it's part of our nature to walk around and sing a tune, to, dance a little jig when we're happy, right? Things like that. You don't have to be an artist to do something artistic at all. So over this next month, how can you incorporate Neptune? How can you invite Neptune in? Because the challenging part with Neptune is, or any planet, is when you don't invite them in and you don't use them in a constructive way, they become destructive, right? They become the shadow versions of themselves, the lower octave versions of themselves. And with Neptune, one of the dangers here is, addictive, escapist tendencies. And these are typically not constructive. Sometimes they are, right? Sometimes we just need to go into a little fantasy land for a little while, and, have dreams and have visions and have things that we want to construct, especially with Saturn here. How do we want to make our dreams real? But when we're using this energy to not deal with life because we're not having any intentions of making dreams real, we can get stuck in not wanting to be here, not wanting to be present, not wanting to deal with life, have 5 alcoholic beverages when you know you should have one, something like that, going shopping to fill a void, even spiritual experiences. There are so many people right now that are addicted to spiritual experiences. Um, I came across someone recently that was talking about how many ayahuasca ceremonies they had done in a month. I thought, I don't know if that's, I think it's a little judgy, but it's wow, that sometimes when we do that, we go too far into the other realms and we don't really come back, right? Or we can get addicted to wanting to be in these out of body experiences. And then we lose our connection to being embodied, which is really the whole reason we're here. So, too much Neptune can really be detrimental. The other problem is falling for deceptions, whether it's you being the deceiver or someone else deceiving you. That's a real challenge with all this Pisces energy, and particularly with Neptune at the final degrees, is what is real, right? Who's putting on a show? Who's a charlatan? It could be you, right? Is there some way in your life where you are being self-deceptive? It's a possibility here. The last piece about Neptune that I want to say on this particular moon is that the god of the seas, right, bringing in all of this oceanic, these tides, these emotional tides, it can be very overwhelming. I've noticed definitely since all these planets have made a pile up in Pisces that I've been very emotional. I've cried almost every day for the last week. Now, for me, it's very cathartic. It feels like a release, and there's so much that's moving because crying is also a reset of the nervous system. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing at all. Right. Um, and sometimes for people who may not have maybe a lot of water in their charts or things like that, it might feel a little foreign to have so much of this like bubbling up, right? The tides coming up from the depth of the ocean. So just be aware of that. Find that compassion, let it out, find an artistic expression, find a spiritual expression, find some kind of expression, right? For these planets to move, because otherwise that's when they get trapped and they get stuck. And we don't want Neptune to get stuck and take us down, right? Drown us at the bottom of the sea. That's not what we're going for here. But so much happening on this new moon. The last couple of things here that I want to talk about have to do with this planetary pileup in Aquarius, right? And some of these planets also in Aries here. So we have a lot going on. I was thinking about this morning when I was watching Sense and Sensibility, which is one of my favorite movies and definitely a favorite of Jane Austen's novels. I've got a little romantic heart over here. So I was watching that and I thought, oh my gosh, that's so perfect for this new moon because we have so much of kind of this pull, this need to incorporate sense and sensibility. So sense being like, practicality, rationality. And if we thought about that, right, that would so be Aquarius, right? Sense, the mind, right? Being rational, being logical in a sense. And Taurus, right? Taurus is practical. Taurus says, yeah, that's great, but is it worth my time? Is it worth doing? Does it make sense? Is it practical? Is it useful? Can we embody it? So we have these two energies here, right? And the Taurus planets with Uranus there being definitely connected to Aquarius. And then we have the sensibility, right? The sensibility, the emotions, both with Pisces and Aries, although they're quite different, right? Pisces, literal feelings and emotions. Aries, we don't think of Aries maybe as emotional, but it is. It's really about like enthusiasm, right? About firing things up, about being inspired, about living in the moment and being present, right? So we have this kind of invitation to bring sense and sensibility together because we really don't want to forsake one in over the other. We want to invite them both in. And with the whole sky, as you look, the ascendant over here really doesn't apply. All of the planets are in the last two signs of the zodiac, right? And the first two. The only thing really sitting on the other side is that South Node in Libra, right? So we have everything over here. Again, that logical, that rational, that practicality, the innovation that's coming through, also sitting next to, the compassion and the enthusiasm and the wanting to bring things back into the world. So we really, as I said at the beginning, we're really at this precipice of the old and the new, the things that are coming down the line. We have a lot coming down as well. We have tons more energy coming up in 2024. This year will not be boring at all. It's going to be one of those years that we look back on and realize how much really changed at this point. And again, over 2025 and 2026, we have massive amounts of huge planetary cycles occurring within a compressed space. So if you feel all this pressure, you feel the compression, you feel like, oh my gosh, right? Everything is transforming. That's completely appropriate for what's going on right now. And for those of you who have been doing the work for a long time and you're further along in your journey and you've, in a sense, lightened the load, right? Found more of your light body here on Earth, these are the people that we need to, in a sense, step up so that we can find you, so that we can hear you, so that you can help guide the other people who are newer along in the process. Remember, not everyone will go into the new earth in the sense of when we talk about new earth, or at least the way that I talk about it, it's a state of consciousness, right? Not everyone's going to go, and that's okay, right? Remember, it's not our job to force people. They have to make their own decisions. We are all sovereign beings. But for those of us who have been on this journey for a while, are able to help guide other people, it's time to really step up. And maybe that's the part of your chart that you need to share. Whew, big, huge, full report there on that new moon. There's a lot going on. March is definitely, the energy is ramping up. April will be even more intense with even more things happening. So really do whatever you can to take care of yourself, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Take good care of you, right? I hope this was helpful. I hope it was illuminating. If you need some help with your own chart and say, hey, I don't know what's going on, help me navigate this pressure cooker that I feel like I'm in, I've got linked below. You can book a reading with me and we can talk about personally what's going on for you so that you can get more illumination and more clarity and some more confidence moving forward, because this is definitely a tricky time on the planet, but an amazing one as well. So I hope that helps. Until next time, take care.